Welcome, everyone. My name is Elvira Tamus. I'm the course coordinator of the Global History Lab, and it is my pleasure to welcome you at the 4th episode of the Dialogues podcast. In this series, students and teachers of the lab from various points of the globe discuss the main themes and issues we learn about. Today, we're looking at displacement and statelessness. Our speakers are Hareim Hadi, Noor Abdulkareem Tawfeeq, Lano Ako Ibrahim, Shady Sirwan Salih, Mastan Abdullah Jalal, Daleen Farhad Majeed, and Kashan Aram from the American University of Iraq, Sulaimani, as well as Ramona Abuelezz and Rasha Abdelbaki from the Modern University for Business and Science, and Peghla Shalamkhel from Smolny Beyond Borders. Thank you so much for joining this discussion today. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. The first challenge question I have for you today is, when we look at displacement and statelessness across history, what changes more over time? The causes of displacement or the ways societies justify and respond to it? Who wants to start? Rasha, please.
Okay. So I wrote down what I wanted to say. So when looking at displacement and statelessness across history, wait. What changes more is usually the justification of it by how people respond. Since the causes of displacement are usually all the same, like wars, right to land, and civil unrest, while society dictates whether the affected people of the war are viewed as victims or a threat to their country. Some examples are like the natives in America with the Europeans, or the Iraqis against the Americans. We also got the Armenians against the Turks. But some people viewed them as threats to their society and viewed it as they should get displaced and should like leave their place for the ones that were conquering it. Others saw them as victims and wanted them to stay there and the colonizers to leave.
Thank you, Rasha. Who would like to follow up? Ramona?
I do agree with Rasha. When examining displacement and statelessness across history, I would argue that the causes show strong continuity, while the ways societies justify and respond to displacement change more visibly. Like across different historical periods, like empires, colonial regimes, nation states, and even like the modern global order, people have been displaced by war, conflict, struggles over land and power, and many more. So the forms evolve, yet the underlying drivers, such as political dominance, territorial control, and security concerns, remain remarkably consistent. So what shifts more clearly is the language of justification. Because in earlier centuries, displacement could be defended through ideas like imperial expansion or civilizing missions. Today, similar dynamics are often framed using terms such as national security, border protection, or demographic pressure. So the vocabulary actually changes, but the logic of inclusion and exclusion frequently persists. And there's one more thing I would like to talk about, which is the media and the very important role it plays. Because media narratives nowadays can humanize suffering and generate empathy, or even normalize violence and produce indifference. So, like, although we live in an era of international law and the human rights discourse, responses remain selective and politicized. Therefore, today may be like less fundamentally different than differently framed.
Thank you, Ramona. It's really interesting to hear the thoughts of students from MUBS. and I'm very excited to hear about how students in other parts of the world see this question. Noor?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, over time, the main reason of displacement have changed in the form of the shape of it, but it is same in its nature because people are forced to move from their land and controlled by the invader or the controller. So in the past, that happened. For example, in the Ottoman empires, they forced people to move from their land to expand their power or for the political control. But at the same time, on the modern life, that happened. We see it every time. We see these situations happen for the people. They are conflict because of the war, and they displaced from their land just because of the political reasons.
Thank you.
And this scene are repeated again and again through history, and we cannot prevent this harm even in modern life. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. Daleen?
I personally think that it's always justified in one way, where you create a common enemy for everybody. You tell them that you should hate this group of people and treat them in this way and displace them, or like not make room for them when they move over to your country. But I think one cause that hasn't been mentioned yet during the meeting is like climate change. For instance, like if I'm speaking really locally from here, south of Iraq has become really inhabitable because of climate change, and a lot of them are moving towards the north. And I think, I don't know how much of it we can say is out of control and how much of it is in control. I don't know, because obviously we know climate change has been caused due to a lot of like things that we do on Earth. Yeah, I think that's one cause that I wanted to add to the others. Thanks.
Thank you, Daleen. We've heard fascinating ideas on how displacement and statelessness changes over time. And now I'm very interested in the teacher's perspective. So, Hareim, if I can ask you, do you think the students, for example, based on your experience, are students mainly interested in displacement and statelessness related to where they are from, stories, narratives that they're more familiar with? Or do they have a more kind of global perspective or understanding of these issues?
I would say the answer is a mixture of both. The nature of course requires us to broaden our perspective, to apply ideas and take case studies across time and place. But of course, as an instructor, it is my role to also try to encourage my student to apply the knowledge locally to make sense of. For example, we as a course are the biggest ethnic group without nation. We are basically stateless. And then recently, just what happened in Rojava in Syria is a present day example that we are actually experiencing on continuously statelessness. So the answer is on one hand, yes, we were discussing case studies which has global ramifications, global significance, as the nature of the course require, but also we try to apply some of these ideas and insights locally and regionally. And I have to say I was very satisfied and happy on how the discussion went.
Me as well. Thank you, Hareim. I experienced something very similar as a teacher in the Global History Lab when I taught students in Uganda, Italy, and I'm going to teach students in Spain this semester, and I'm expecting a similar pattern. Does anyone else have anything to add on this question? If not, I'm very happy to move to the second challenge question that I have for you today, which is quite provocative one. Who gets remembered in global histories of displacement and who remains invisible? How does that shape contemporary policies towards refugees and stateless people? What do you think about remembrance and invisibility? Ramona?
Yes, so global histories tend to remember major events, political transformations, and highly documented tragedies, while the overwhelming majority of displaced individuals remain invisible. The historical memory is shaped like by power, archives, political interests, and media visibility. So some displacement narratives become globally recognized while others remain marginalized or like reduced to statistics, basically. The race, class, gender, and geopolitics influence whose suffering becomes visible and whose pain becomes politically legible. For example, like women's experiences are often underrepresented despite their distinct realities and vulnerabilities. This imbalance has, of course, a direct influence on policy implications. Visibility often generates empathy, advocacy, and legal protection, whereas invisibility can lead to neglect or delayed response. For that, recognition becomes not only a matter of memory, but also a form of protection, if we can say.
Thank you, Ramona. What else can we say about this question? Daleen.
I think for me, this sort of question prompts a much more important one. Like, yes, now we understand who's being neglected, but what's the reason? I think one answer I can come up with is the people in power. In terms of gender, let's say it's more men, hence why female problems are considered less. But yeah, I think that's one question I'd want to ask, like why do those certain people become invisible? Is it just because of the power or who holds power? Yeah.
Crucial point. I agree. Noor?
Yes, thank you. As Dareen said, actually, displaced people, not all of them are remembered equally because some people of well-known countries and with a big majority, they take attention of the organizations like United States and protect them. But some other people from minority group, they are still invisible and they don't get much protect from these organizations and they are suffering and conflict. They are neglected, actually. No one support them. Like Rohingya people in Myanmar, they are still stateless because of extractive industries and no one care about their habits. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. What you said triggered an interesting point in my mind. I am Hungarian. I grew up there in Hungary and studied history the first time in Hungary. And now looking back at the curriculum that we had, although it was really comprehensive, but it was obviously really Eurocentric. So we studied and we focused on issues that were mainly related to Europe, and especially our own country in one way or another, which makes sense. On the one hand, it makes sense we study what happened to us or what has a direct influence over our lives. But there's so much that we leave out. And one of the things that I find particularly exciting about the Global History Lab is that we open up this horizon and we encounter so many more narratives that we probably haven't encountered in our, national settings and schools and institutions. I don't know if you have similar experiences or not, but this is something that your points made me think of.
Can I have a comment?
Hareim, please.
I think the idea that a course like this should be studied at different universities in different parts of the world is important for several reasons, but I'm going to just mention one of them. If there is a blind spot, epistemically speaking, in Western approach to history, then, for example, when it comes to Middle East and Kurdish course, here at AUIS, I have this opportunity to allow my student to see the blind spot of Western approach to history. I mean, when I was looking at the case studies, the Kurdish case I hardly mentioned, even though since the last century up to now, continuously we are facing displacement. One time in Iraq, one time in Turkey, one time in Syria, and just as I mentioned, just is the moment that we are speaking is happening in Syria. Yet it has not mentioned in the case studies, in the textbook, so forth. But what's important, as I said, since this course like this is offered in different part of the world, then it is the responsibility of us as a teaching fellow, as a student as well, to broaden the perspective and to fill the gap of epistemic blind spots that might happen in intentionally or unintentionally in Western approach to knowledge, including history. I will not take more than this.
Yes, I completely agree. Kashan?
Yes, I will give my answer on this. And like we see in the global histories of the displacement, the groups most often are remembered by the ones who are suffering, was documented by the powerful states or international institutions. Large crises involving the geopolitically important regions tend to become more official in history. In contrast, many other remain invisible. Many other countries they remain invisible, and especially in this, we can say that the colonized populations, rural communities, and the stateless people who lack documentation. Also, we can say that the archives are shaped by the power, so they often record displacement from the perspectives of governments rather than the displaced individuals themselves. Like today, because their legal protection depends on visibility, mostly the suffering fits specific categories to receive recognition. If groups experience is not legally or politically legal, it becomes easier for to exclude them from the protections and don't look at them at all.
Thank you, Kashan. That was an excellent point on archives. What is being preserved? Just because we go into the archives, even if we have access and we can read the languages in which those documents are written, we might not find everything that we're looking for. And let me just say here that the third part of the Global History Lab, which I'm sure you're all really excited about, is the Global History Dialogues, in which students have the chance to do their own research projects. So they have a research question, they identify people they can interview, and they conduct oral history interviews. And by doing so, they kind of create an archive, right? The interviews that you conduct will become a kind of counter archive that can complement what is being preserved in official, national, or local archives. And I'm sure you already have many exciting ideas about what you'd like to do research on. But yes, archives, very important point. Does anyone else have anything to add here? One thing I would mention, I would like to invite you to think a bit about media. Branches of media which have a lot of power over how people think about global issues, especially, I think, displacement and statelessness. What kind of patterns do you see in journalism, photojournalism, if you switch on the news wherever you are? or in more in general, what do you think about the role or the responsibility of journalists, for example? Rasha?
The role of journalists is usually to tell people what is happening around the world. But usually, journalists, especially if there's a war between their country, show the population of their country or the people of their country what is happening, who's losing, who's winning, and tell them about what their country is going through the war. They might also use propaganda or false information to make their the people of their country feel like remorse of about what is happening, so they can side with them even if they're the ones that are committing the wrong or may war.
Thank you, Rasha. And Ramona?
Yeah, so I have mentioned that while answering the first question, media actually plays a crucial role nowadays, because displacement is not only a material reality but also a narrative one. So the narratives written by the media and shared by media can humanize suffering and generate empathy or even normalize violence and produce indifference. So this means that displacement today is shaped not only by the events but by the representation of the media.
Thank you, Ramona. It's another very important point. And let me ask you another quite provocative question. Do you think that throughout years, when there's an ongoing conflict that people hear and see a lot about, what kind of tendencies do you see? I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both. I'm just interested in your experiences, your insights. Do you think people can, so to speak, get used to the fact that there's a war somewhere and people are suffering and we hear about it all the time? Do you think rather people get enough and people stand up and people say enough is enough and we should end this? What kind of reactions do you see if you look around, either in your student communities, professional or academic circles, or families, wherever you live? What do you think about this?
I mean, I will keep it very short, I promise. If what's happening, let's say, I don't know, take any part of the world, that there are refugee crises. If media cover this incident only in terms of here is some numbers of displaced people from this part of the world to that part of the world, and that's it, I would say it will not generate a response that we need to see at global scale. But argumentatively speaking, if the story is covered in a way that is people are not reduced to numbers, but there are actually stories at individual level, then that will speak to our heart, so to speak, not just to our mind, and that would create a holistic and humanistic response to refugee crisis.
Thank you, Hareim. What does everyone else think about either my question or Hareim's point, or basically any of the previous topics we addressed? And I'm really interested in what kind of thoughts we can spark in each other's minds. Ramona?
Yeah, so I believe that media plays a decisive role in whether societies become desensitized to war. Like constant exposure to images of violence can normalize conflict, especially when coverage becomes repetitive or framed as routine news. But at the same time, responsible storytelling can humanize suffering and sustain empathy. So, in this sense, media does not only inform people, it shapes emotional response and the attention and even moral urgency across the world.
Thank you, Ramona. Any other thoughts? If you think about the previous semester when you studied the history of the word course, in which displacement and statelessness was a recurring topic, of course. We study, for those who doesn't know, we study in the history of the word course, we study the history of the word from 1300 until today, basically. And what we're really interested in is connections, the interconnectedness of the globe in the late medieval, early modern contemporary times. So how certain events, individuals, movements, certain phenomena affect one another throughout the world. And I guess my question is, if you just think about this very intense course you studied for half a year, what are the main topics that pop to your mind in relation to displacement and statelessness? What were the most intriguing, most shocking, most striking case studies that you had in this course? What did you learn the most about? I'd be happy to hear from.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
Since people are still thinking about your question.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, you guys, I think there was a kind of agreement that in terms of causes of displacement is the same. But the language has been different from imperial ambition to security and kind of modern language that nation state used to justify displacing people. My question is about what about responses? Do you guys see the difference between how people respond to displacement if you compare past to present? And let me give you a tip. The language of refugee and IDP, or the international agencies such as United Nations High Commission of Refugee, what sort of differences this sort of community and UN agencies play in terms of how we respond to displaced people, if you compare present to past? Is it the same? Is it different?
I think it's different actually. Um, for example, in many regions today, large movements of refugees are framed primarily as a national security issue. Instead of focusing on humanitarian protection, political discourse often emphasizes border control, surveillance, and even the risk of instability. This framing shifts attention actually from the causes of displacement to the perceived threat posed by displaced populations themselves.
Thank you.
A very obvious follow-up question. In terms of protection, are we providing more protection to displaced people in comparison to the past? And why? What has changed?
Noor?
Yes, um, actually, I can't see any differences from the past till now. But now I know we have new systems. For example, we have new organizations and institutions that can help those displaced people and protect them. But what happened for those people? They don't have a human right till now. Their children, the women, without any protect. They are struggling. They don't have anything help them to live a good life. There are inequality actually. I don't see any thing that can, or any action, big action to make them live in legal life or with the recognition for them. They are still suffering. that the point, because I know they provide them with food and medical treatment and many other things, but where is their human rights? They are stateless. They don't have anything in life. Think about their children, this generation, how will grow up. I think this is the point. We don't have any big action for them till now. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. Ramona?
Okay, so legally, international frameworks are designed to protect displaced people, basically. In theory, protection is meant to be universal and based on need, but in practice, politics often shapes who actually receives protection. States decide which populations qualify, how strictly rules are applied, and which rights are enforced. So legal rules exist on paper, but political considerations often determine access to safety, resources, and even resettlement. For example, the Syrian refugees were granted large-scale international support in some countries, while equally affected populations in Yemen and other parts of the world received far less aid and legal protection, largely due to political visibility and strategic interest, maybe.
Thank you, Ramona. I'd be very keen to hear from some of our speakers who might have additional thoughts on these questions. Peghla or Mastan or Shady. I'm just welcoming you to reflect on any of the questions that we have addressed so far.
If I may rephrase the question and make it easier, for those who have not yet participated, what did you guys learn the most from this course? What stands out? What particular theme or case study that was shocking or that was interesting, that was important for you?
Daleen, before you speak, I just wanted to say just one sentence. You can also think of a particular source that was really shocking or exciting or thought-provoking for you. So either a photograph or a textual source, for example, from a refugee or anyone related to statelessness, the topic of statelessness. You can also think about sources. What kind of sources do we discuss in Global History Lab? Okay, so Daleen and then Mastan. Or Mastan can start if Daleen prefers to speak later.
Can I start?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, some of the most integrating case studies for me were the partition of India and Pakistan, which displaced millions almost overnight, and forced migrations under colonial regimes, where entire communities were moved to serve economic or political purposes. So I was shocked by how many people became stateless simply because of changing laws or colonial policies, not because of anything they did. So what I really learned is that displacement and statelessness are deeply connected to power, law, and history. They're not just crises that appear suddenly. They often have long roots in political decisions, borders, and inequality. It made me see that today's refugee and stateless crisis are part of a bigger historical pattern, and understanding that pattern helps us think about prevention and responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a truly fascinating case study. I agree. Peghla.
Okay, thank you very much. I think everything that I've heard was very interesting, and as I'm also a refugee. I've grown up as a refugee and still I'm a refugee. Uh, but I think when I was hearing to all of these things, and I was thinking about the suffering that we were going through, but weren't able to even verbalize it, you know. I think I was thinking about, is it the language, or because maybe it's more beyond the language? Because you know, when I want to talk about like the Afghan refugees, like you know, and recently, our government collapsed, right? And the many refugees were forced to come back to Afghanistan, even though they were not willing to come, because in Afghanistan we don't have the country, the government, that most of the people were happy to come back, but they didn't have any choice. Like they were forced come back from Iran, from Pakistan. Even the children that they born in Pakistan, they are stateless, they don't have any voice, they don't have any authority, they don't have any name, you know. And they you know, I think they're human beings, but I think uh, you know, it's but still they were shown as a problem for the neighboring countries, you know, uh, not those peoples that they have the problems. I think when media covers all these things, like it shows that those refugees are the problem, so they should be forced back to their countries. But that's not the case, you know. Refugees leave their country because they are unable to live in their own country. So I think that's all.
Peghla, thank you so much. That was provided us with a fascinating insight, and I found it really touching how first when you said that sometimes refugees don't necessarily have the words to describe their experiences. So obviously that's hindering the, mutual understanding between people who are displaced and people who are not, right? Having different vocabularies. How to explain something that happened to me or my family, maybe through our generations. And this other idea made me think about it even more deeply when you said that in the media and often in political discourses, the way displacement and statelessness and refugees and migration is portrayed as like these issues are portrayed in a way that we only focus on the problems that these people create for, us who live in our countries and who kind of welcome these people, or they arrive in our countries and what kind of problems they create for us who live here. And it was really powerful how you said that we sometimes, or actually more often than sometimes, ignore the actual problems that causes refugee crisis. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Anyone, any reflection on Pegla's insights?
I think we had Daleen
Yes,
previously.
Daleen was raising them.
I take it back. I put my hand down.
It's okay. Anyone else? We also haven't fully finished answering the question, case studies or primary sources that you found particularly provocative, fascinating, shocking, thought-provoking. I'm also interested in the things that you learned the most about in the Global History Lab. Or Hareim, maybe, do you remember any sources that you had a long discussion about with your students?
I mean, usually there was a lot of discussion in my class. I mean, the style of my teacher is I put questions and allow my student to discuss. But the fact that there was civilization in North America and South America by indigenous people, I think that was one of the shocking discovery for my students, because this is not what we see in American Hollywood movies, right? Quote unquote, they were savage. But actually, before European conquering their lands, there were civilizations, and I think that was one of the interesting case studies that created a lot of discussion.
Yes, indeed. I remember that case study as well. That's also something we don't focus enough on, I think, in more traditional school curricula. Okay, I think it's time to open up the floor to more general questions. So after my challenge questions, I'm really interested in questions from our audience. If they want to ask anything from you, our roundtable speakers, or if you guys have any questions to each other, because obviously we're kind of promoting this course between various points of the globe where global history exists. And I'm curious whether you have any questions to each other.
Well, I have a question to all of us, including myself. So the question is, in addition to military force, economic force, political force that shape history, how do you guys appreciate or assess the role of new ideas in shaping history? And I want you to think of, for example, anti-racism movements, anti-sexism movement, anti-colonialism movements, all those movements in which later on it had political and economic ramifications, they all started as new ideas. So the question is, how would you appreciate the role of new ideas vis-a-vis other forces in history, economic, military, political forces, in shaping and redirecting history?
It's a great question.
Let me make it easy, guys. Think of green economy. Do you think green economy as a concept will have a ramification in terms of how we actually advocate new economic policies? Then maybe, Elvira, maybe you should try to share us your thought.
Anyone can jump in and share their thoughts. I'm very happy to answer, but first I am interested in how you would answer your own question.
Well, for me, I mean, that's relevant to the nature of the work that I did in my second PhD actually, in which I analyzed the role of ideas in major socio-political movements argumentatively. And what I have discovered is, if normatively you are able to change enough people's mind, then change at society level will occur. For example, the fact that women didn't have the right to vote until recently, historically speaking, was due to the fact that women were not even considered to be a person. But then when feminist philosophers were making serious arguments because of the following, when women are also a person, then policies catch up, and then the door was open for women to vote. So changes, guys, yes, sometimes military had an impact, or economic force had an impact, but sometimes the role of new ideas was also create a foundation for new socio-political movements. Hence, we should not discount the role of and the power of words, including the power of our words as a young intellect and researchers. So speak your mind.
Wonderful, wonderful idea and message for all of us. Ramona.
Exactly, I do agree. Anti-racism movements and other movements have made societies more aware of discrimination and pushed for policies like that protect vulnerable groups. Before these movements, many people were ignored or even excluded, even when laws actually existed. So, but now their voices are being recognized politically and even socially because of these movements. So we all should be open to new ideas.
Thank you, Ramona. Rasha?
We can make people open to new ideas and know about them by advocating for them online, telling people about them, making friendly protests outside to tell people about them, informing by podcasts, by informing your friends. There's also votes and petitions to make something available in their country. They get petitions and give them around their neighborhood or something. And when they get enough petitions, they send it to their government to show them that this neighborhood or this population would want to advocate or want to have these rights or these um, stuff available to them.
Thank you, Rasha. And to answer the question, myself, I completely agree. And what your thoughts, Hareim, Rasha, and Ramona, kind of incited in me was the fact that education exists in so many different forms, right? We shouldn't just think of, primary school, secondary school, university, and that's the only way you can be educated. One of you mentioned podcasts. Yes. Journalism now accessible in so many ways, right? Not just the, daily newspaper we have in our town or the national newspaper. And that's why I also really appreciate Global History Lab and many other alternative platforms where we can learn about all these various ideas, right? Sometimes coming from so far away. And this is what I really appreciate about the digital age, right? There's so many threats and dangers and risks in today's day and age. But the fact that we can educate ourselves, not just formally, not just institutionally, but educate ourselves in different topics, and support many educational platforms and initiatives, something that I am really passionate about. Ramona.
I do really agree with you. And like the most important thing to me is like to connect rights with fairness, dignity, and like shared human values, because people often resist new ideas about rights because they challenge existing power and traditions or even social norms. And here I would like to mention an example. We all know Martin Luther King Jr. Like in the United States, he made people more receptive to civil rights through nonviolent protests, speeches, and appeals to justice and mortality. So his leadership actually highlighted the gap between law and lived reality, making the public and lawmakers recognize that like racial equality was not only a moral issue, but a political and legal one as well. So over time, this openness translated into concrete changes, like for example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is only one example. There are a lot of figures to talk about. So yeah.
Thank you, Ramona. And thank you, Harim, for this excellent question that provoked all these ideas. Right, we're coming to the end, close to the end of our discussion. So I just want to kind of again encourage you and by opening up the floor and ask you to give any kind of last round of reflections, insights on what we discussed today. You can tell everything you couldn't in the past hour.
Well, I want to express my appreciation for this opportunity and thank you all for participating. And yeah, let's make this happen again. You can sign me on.
Thank you very much, Hareim. I'm also really thankful for your participation. Anyone else?
Yes, I would
Anyone
like to
wants
add
to share?
something.
Ramona, please. Yeah, go ahead.
History does not simply describe the past for me. It shapes how we interpret the present and even imagine the future. When talking about displacement is neither new nor purely accidental. It is influenced by power, law, borders, governance, and narratives, as we have said before. Yet history also shows resilience, adaptation, and like the possibility of change, which I think this is something that we cannot underrepresent. But failing to engage critically with history risks repeating patterns of exclusion and instability. So, understanding global histories of displacement allows society to move from reaction to prevention and from charity to actual justice. So, as students, I believe that we stand between the memory of the past and the possibility of the future, just to be not inheriting the future as maybe previous generations, but to help shaping our future. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're very welcome, and thank you for these wonderful concluding thoughts. Noor?
Yes, first, thank you for this session. Actually, from the history, we can know that displacement is unavoidable. We cannot avoidable this thing. It is not something that in modern life happens now. It happens from long ago, from the centuries, many centuries ago. But now this can give us the tools to protect and support displaced people that can help us to make something for them today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peghla?
I want to just add a little bit that displacement is not a choice. I think it's more like a push. It's if as a refugee, if I have a choice to go back to my country, I will choose to go back. But that's not the choice that I have. So, and many refugees I've seen, I've seen it. The suffering that they are going through, and they don't have the option to go back to their countries. They really wish to. They have that wish, not continuously as a child that they grown up, but still they don't have that choice.
Thank you so much. I think that's also a significant point to emphasize, right? The fact that many refugees would return home if that was a possibility. And many of them have a very strong connection to the land where they're from and society, and they would like to bring something back and rebuild the society if this is possible. So thank you very much for sharing that. Right. I'm afraid we used our time and had a wonderful, fascinating discussion. Thank you so much again for all the insights, all the contributions, all your thoughts. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure that our current audience and the future audience will also learn a lot from your points and thoughts and reflections. I would like to encourage you as well as our audience members to continue to watch the series. The previous episodes are online as well, and this will be uploaded too. Many thanks again, indeed, and I wish you all the best for the rest of your GHR journey. Especially when you will conduct your oral history interviews and write your final assignments, which will be uploaded to the Global History Dialogues website, so everyone can read about your super exciting research projects. And of course, all the best for your studies and lives in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your participation. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.